event, and I'm so excited to be here for the Notebook panel today. We've got an amazing lineup, and I'm going to just bring them out. Why not, right? Let's get started. So first we have Shelley Williams, the co-director of The Notebook. Any dancers you want to go across the stage? Like maybe some Sister Act 2 if anyone knows that movie? Yeah? All right, next, Ryan Vasquez. Our actor, Noah. And Marianne Plunkett, hello. And then we have Carmel Dean, who is music supervision, orchestrations, and arranger. All right. So is it anyone's first time at BroadwayCon in the audience? And what about y'all on stage? First time? First time. Welcome, welcome. Congratulations. Was anyone here for the first one with the blizzard? Me too. What a whirlwind. I'm glad it's the opposite of that now because it's summer. It's settled in my chair. Okay. So I'm excited to be here with y'all. Welcome, happy first BroadwayCon. It's so exciting, everyone. But so thinking about The Notebook, let's talk about it. What was your familiarity with the property, whether it was the book or the movie, before joining this project? Let's start with Shelley. Work our way down.
I knew the movie.
Okay.
I knew the movie very well, and I loved the movie. I read the book after I got the job.
Okay.
Yeah, I had seen the movie in theaters. A lot of it went over my head, not to date myself, but
I understood all of it.
Wow, people are really crying. Yeah, and then I also read the book after I started working on it. And I think it's interesting how it's been sort of like kept in the culture for so long. Like it's sort of been like meme-ified almost, like with these iconic moments and stuff. So it's been cool to adapt it into its own entity, which I think is neat.
I had not read the book or seen the movie, but I had seen scenes from the movie, you know, the iconic scenes. And I certainly had heard about the book, but the script is what sold me. It's just such a beautiful script, and with the music, I thought, I need to do this. So.
Yeah. And I had always heard about it, but I'd never seen it, or I'd never read it. And then maybe about 10 years ago, it was on TV, and I was at a friend's house. And also, I grew up in Australia, and it just feels like a classic. Yeah, Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. And it's such an American classic, contemporary American classic. So, you know, it was when I was finally living here, I watched it and I was like, oh yeah, I see why this is so beloved.
It hit. Well, I love that y'all came to the project with different perspectives, and Marianne, I like that you said the script really drew you in, and I was curious to hear from all of you, how did you get involved with the project? Let's start with Marianne.
Michael Greif called me and asked if I would participate in a workshop 4 years ago, right? Yeah. Yeah, right before COVID. Yeah, it was 4.5 years ago. And literally weeks or days before COVID, we had 2 weeks that Ryan was there too. And I fell in love with the project and just wanted to do it very badly. So.
Yeah, it was a unique thing because often, you know, you develop these shows as a part of it for years and years and years, and the creatives and folks are often involved even longer, and the cast will come on sort of as the last piece. But as you do different readings, a lot of the time, you know, after working with you for a couple of weeks, they realize it's not a fit, or they realize the project is going in a different direction, or the role is eliminated altogether. So you sort of come into these readings thinking, you know, you can't fall too in love with something knowing that they could change direction and cut you loose, and it's nothing personal. But when we did that reading right prior to the pandemic, I was like, oh man, like you hate to get your hopes up, but I'm really hopeful that this will continue with me. And so throughout the pandemic, we continued to do readings on Zoom and different things, and it's a credit to the directors, Shelley and Michael, that they were really able to envision the production even apart from all of us being in the same room. Like often in these readings on Zoom, we would be, singing through something or talking through something, and you would hear like the exact image of what was going to happen. These shutters are going to close, and the bridge is going to fly up, and whatever. And a lot of it is intact. It's amazing, like the amount of work that was able to be done without being able to convene. And then when we did finally, again, it was like the dam just burst, like in terms of emotionally and everything. So so a long road to, of course, as all shows have, but to get here. So.
I came onto the project after the workshop that they did, and I think after also one of your virtual readings. I think I came up with the second virtual reading. I joined in 2020, the summer of 2020, and Michael Greif, we've been friends for almost 30 years. We worked on Rent together. He called me and said, I'm working on a piece, and I would love for you to consider co-directing it with me. And I was shocked because Michael certainly doesn't need a co-director. And I said, okay, well, why do you want me to work on this with you? And he said, this piece is so special, and it's so delicate, and the way that we're talking about casting it really does require a great deal of thought and consideration. And I think that you would be a great thought partner and creative to be a part of this team as we go on the journey of this piece. And then I read it, and then I heard the music, and I just fell in love. And it just hit every single button. It was smart, it was funny, it's an emotional story, but it is earned. It is not, it's not there to just be intentionally emotional. I really felt each of the couples had their own beautiful story and were justified, and I loved the fact that they were focusing mostly on the older Noahs and Allies, because I thought that what a brilliant way to tell this story from that perspective. I also happened to be staying with my family in Ohio, and my mom has Alzheimer's, so I was living with this at the moment. And so it really hit me that I knew this story as a human, but I had never seen my own self inside this story in any kind of entertainment. And so it really meant so much to me that the approach that the authors and Michael had with this is to make it a more inclusive piece so that many people could see themselves inside the story.
Absolutely. And I love the phrase thought partner. That's so great for co-directors. That's great. Yeah. Carmen, what about you?
I was called by Kurt Deutsch, who's one of the lead producers, probably 5 years ago now, before any readings or anything, to have a meeting with Ingrid Michaelson. And my job as music supervisor and arranger is always just to work incredibly closely with the composer. So if that's not a good fit, then it's not going to work. So the very first thing for me was, I guess, an interview or a meeting with Ingrid. And I'll never forget, I went out to Brooklyn, met her in this little coffee shop, and we just clicked right away, and probably 3 hours later we walked out of that coffee shop arm in arm, and I'm like, I love this woman, so I'll do whatever she needs me to do. I know I'm going to love this piece, I'm going to love the collaboration. So it was all about meeting Ingrid for me, and I loved her music, obviously. So yeah, that was my way in.
She knows how to tell a story through music. I feel like that's her, bread and butter, which is perfect for musical theater. And so I know we're all musical theater fans here, but for those who might not be familiar with music supervision and arranger versus orchestrator, can you explain a little bit about what your role was?
Yeah, so in a nutshell, my job is to work with the composer to further theatricalize the song. So someone like Ingrid, who comes from the singer-songwriter pop world, she's incredible because she actually trained in a musical theater, so she does have that background. But quite often I've been asked to work with people like Ingrid, or people who have even less musical theater training, to figure out how to take their song that is typically written in a pop song format and to translate it to the stage. So it may need different voices, different harmonies, a key change in the middle. It needs to go from A to B story-wise. So I just have a tool belt full of musical tools that I use to help bring the storytelling about in the song.
It's such an important piece of work, and I'm glad that we get to have you today to talk to us about it. And then Shelley, I want to talk to, because you were saying you're such a fan of the movie. Michael asked you to be a thought partner and a co-director. I think it can be hard when there are stage adaptations of beloved properties that already exist, right? So when he approached you and asked, come join this project, you said you had the personal experience. What were your initial thoughts of how can we make this a truly theatrical experience?
I was very fortunate because Becca and Ingrid knew how to do that. So what I read was something that was very cohesive and very thoroughly thought out. It was not a big lift in that way. They're enormously smart, and they were very clear about the story they wanted to tell and the perspective they wanted to tell it from. So the credit is to them for sure. The thing that is beautiful about what we do and why I love what we do so much is that we have a medium that both invites an audience to be a part of it and to have a unique experience that is communal and individual. And when you're doing a piece that is so beloved, and I've worked on a few of those, it is important to allow space for you to have your own memories inside it, and also to create space for you to feel welcome into the newness that we want to bring to it. So there's like a delicate balance, and I always call it like a gentle calibration of allowing people to love what they love and also inviting them to love the newness of what we are bringing.
I got to interview Becca earlier in the spring, and she said the same kind of thing of like, we wanted the story first and foremost to investigate kind of like the big universal themes of life, right? And so I think that definitely came across with the direction, the acting, the music, it all worked seamlessly together. And so I want to hear from the actors, for y'all, whether it was in rehearsal or once you got into performances, what did you discover about yourself through your characters? We could start with Ryan and then go to Marianne.
I think what drew me, as we were talking, about what drew me to the show initially. One of the biggest things that drew me to it is that it is so deeply human, the way that it's written, even the lyrics and the song. I mean, there's always a suspension of disbelief, right? Like in musical theater, you're going to begin singing in the middle of a sentence, but there was something about it that felt already like me. Like it was, and that's another benefit of having, developed it for a little while, is we were working with very humble collaborators in terms of there was a true community of people working to find the best moment, the best line, the best little choice in one specific scene, in one specific moment that felt natural both to the story and what fit into the whole, but also to the individual who is portraying the part. And so I've always felt like at home in the role, which is rare. Usually you're sort of like finagling your way into, especially if the writers are a little bit more strict about, we are going to say this scene as exactly this. There's no room for malleability, and I think there's as much Noah in me as like I am now in the literal text of what is written. And what's cool is that, I did Hamilton for a while, and I think that show also sort of stands the test of time because people are able to see more and more individuals in these roles, which was also the concept initially, is that we're suspending disbelief and watching people portray characters, people that we, think we know. And I find joy in sort of being able to create something that's a framework, and now watch other people step into this same role that I helped to make and watch their individuality contribute to it. So it's like a big soup.
Yum yum soup, I love it.
That's well said. It was very well said, and I agree with a lot of what he said. So, but on my part, too, there is that, the fact that over 4 years, to work on something for 4.5 years, waiting for the time when it comes to life, or full life. Like, it's like being pregnant, sort of, and you're waiting, hoping and nurturing. And, I have, my mom lived with dementia also, so I have a very personal connection to Allie. But the process of creating the characters and discovering who the people are. The story, I said it's not a love story. I said it's a life story. It is love, filled with love, but it's two lives well lived, without fanfare, it's just, you see from teenage-dom to the end, and the we see everybody at different parts, you know, while an old scene is going on, a younger or middle will pass by or something. And it's a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream. And I'm just, I say that sounds at this point cliche or corny, but I am so happy to be part of this company, this show, because I've never done anything quite like this, and you know, I'm old now, and I'd say it's in my top 5 of anything I've ever done in my whole career. And I say I reserve 1 for Richard Nelson's work that I did with him, but then I'd say it's of those in the top 2. So, but I just love this play.
And something else that Becca had mentioned during our interview was what y'all were touching on, that it's a life story, not necessarily a love story, and that we see Allie choose not necessarily just which guy she wants, but like what life she wants for herself, which that expansion in the stage adaptation I think is so beautiful. Can
I just say
please.
There's something that was so beautiful about those conversations. It's interesting, I was just chatting with Ingrid about this. I have 3 other songs, Carmel, you remember this, that were there before my days. And I was going through a bunch of, I have a ton of text messages, and Ingrid, when she writes a new song, will just send a text message of like a beautifully produced version of like, you're in my studio in Brooklyn, and I just pulled out my ukulele and did a tune. And so I have so many of those, and I was thinking about the evolution of Allie and the deep conversations that we had as women talking about it is important that she's not choosing what guy. It is important that she's choosing herself. And that is such a different ideology than the musical theater that I have seen over and over and over, in entertainment that I've seen over and over and over, that it really wasn't about Lon or Noah. It was about her life. And so My Days is a real manifestation of women saying, let's have a real conversation about this woman in this moment in her life.
Absolutely. So how did that impact your directorial choices for that moment? Knowing that was the crux of it.
Well, it really is, you know, there were a few things that kind of naturally evolved. You know, the scene between the middles before that really had a lot of evolutions, including in New York, when, you know, there was a little bit of an argument there, and then it got musicalized right before we came to Broadway, that just kind of lifted the stakes. One of the biggest things that we did right in, I think, previews, you know, Noah leaves and Allie used to go after him and say Noah, and instead she kind of stays paralyzed. So there isn't this moment of, I'm running after you, my instinct is to say, no, stay, you know, that she really in that moment is like, what is it that I want? It was so subtle. But just having her stand there and think at the top of that song shifted the way that we saw her in her strength, in her independence, and it wasn't about him. It wasn't about taking care of him. It wasn't about her instinct to go after him. And it really was, before I move, I need to be thoughtful about what it is that I actually want. And he says that to her over and over in the song before. What do you want? What do you want? And there's something really powerful about someone you love saying to you, what is it that you want? You know, not choose me, choose me, choose me, but what do you want? I love you enough to ask you this and demand that you ask this of yourself. And it was a lot that happened in New York with that number specifically.
I wanted to hear about the musical perspective too, Carmel, of like, what was it like, you know, making the choices of how you can really bring the composition of the song to life?
Yeah, it's similar to what Shelley's saying, that, you know, I think the songs, the characters' musical journeys evolved over this period of creation and of collaboration. And I think, you know, Ingrid would probably have said, and maybe she did say early on, like, oh, I don't know how to write a musical theater song. She's used to writing for her own voice. And, you know, in the early days, she'd say, oh, you know, can I have a female voice belt a high E. Is that okay? Is that gonna work? And she was sort of just like playing around with things on a more cerebral level. And then I think, it's funny, I'm just thinking about this now as you asked me, but towards the end, like the many iterations of that song, getting to my days, like she wasn't asking me those questions anymore. Like she understood what Ali should sound like and what the range should be and the progression of the song. So she's an amazing dramaturg, as well as composer. So she found Ali's voice as these different songs came about. And in the end, it obviously made my job so easy because I'm just sitting there holding her hand. Like Ingrid knows how to write a damn good song. But I think that's something that is really, I'm really proud of her for and satisfied by, is just seeing Ingrid evolve as a composer, as a theatrical composer.
She's an astute observer as well, because she would watch the scene and she'd go, "Oh, I see where you need to get to," and then she'd go, "I'll be back." And she's a quick writer.
15 minutes later,
She's a quick writer, but she sat in all of the rehearsals, and her and Becca they were so close and they were so in sync with what needed to happen in a moment that they were very quick to surrender. Oh, that should be a scene. Nope, that should be a song. And I think it was really because of just observing not only what needed to happen in the scene, but also watching how Joy was evolving in those moments, and just watching her body language of like, oh, she wants to, okay, I know what to do here. I know how to follow that instinct of this actor in this moment.
I love that. And y'all made me think of something that I wanted to ask anyways, but the shift in the time period for this show, because I believe the book's the same way, but the movie is the 1940s when we see Noah and Ali, or I guess in that they're adults, but y'all shifted it to the 60s and 70s. And Shelley, what you were just saying about Ali taking a moment for herself to be like, what do I want? I think is powerful to see as a woman, a Black woman, especially during that time. I think is like makes it even bigger in my mind. So I wanted to hear y'all's thoughts on if the time shift impacted your perspective on working on the piece at all. Like, were there little nuances you wanted to add in because of that?
The time shift was everything.
Yeah.
I mean, when I read the piece in the beginning, it was still in that late 30s, early 40s, and then, if you were going to cast it the way that we were planning to cast it, or it had been cast in previous iterations, the story was improbable, because when you're going to see race when they walk on stage, and so there are certain things that you can then go into a theatrical world and kind of go, this is the vocabulary we're using, this is where we're going. But then there are a number of questions that are kind of come up in your head that are just unavoidable. One of the things that we wanted to kind of take away was some of those things. So shifting the time and the place, because it also took place in the South, shifting it to a coastal town is what we have in the playbill. We did find some beaches on the Chesapeake that were, there's some Black beaches, but they had interracial crowds, concerts. They were right next to, white beaches, and they were integrated communities. So we're like, okay, now we know a place where this could happen, and we know a time period where this could happen. And there's still a war that's anchoring that, which was very important. So moving it to the Vietnam War, moving it to 1968, kept the stakes that existed in the book, allowed our situations to be possible and probable. It also very interesting because it was in that area, the father being in aeronautics, like all of that, like there's a big, huge Black university, Lincoln University. We were like, we actually have a full storyline for all of these characters and it all works. And so that gave us permission to say, now we can use a theatrical vocabulary and shift races throughout this period of time and say these are our Noahs and these are our Alis, and now we're using a theatrical convention, and that's the only thing we're using because everything else is anchored in something that could very seriously be true.
and I know I keep referencing this interview with Becca, but it was very enlightening and I loved it. And we talked about the casting as well, and she was like, when it came to the casting, we were just looking at the souls. And when I saw The Notebook, I mean, all of the cast members seemed so aligned, but I could not help but notice, Marianne, you and Jordan, I literally feel like are the same person almost. Like it was so wild. Has anyone here you've seen it live? You get what I'm saying, right? Like, again, all the actors, but you two specifically, it like took my breath away. I was like, I totally get what Becca meant with that. So I wanted to hear from our actors as well. What was it like finding chemistry with your other half, if you will, but also your fellow Allie and Noah's? We'll start with Marianne.
You know, a lot of watching went on. I would watch and listen and observe and delight because both my younger selves are and yearn, you know, watching. I'm like, I remember, you know, and finding movement or a touch. You know, how do you touch? You know, is it a gesture you give, you know, and try to follow through? And so it's not imitating, but just if there's, again, it's about the spirit, really, for all three of us, about that, the driving, the fire, the passion of seeking, curiosity. But finding if there are just a few places where this is a common thread of this. And it's been the most beautiful puzzle, and you know, of unraveling the younger. And we had a very sad one in Chicago. Our Noah became ill, and he died a year ago, June. And we had a workshop in August, and I was dreading it. Oh my God, are they gonna try to find somebody to just come in for this 3 days? That'll kill me. And what they did was, so beautifully, they had Ryan and John, the middle and young Noah, read old Noah's part with me. So it gave me the perspective of that I'm looking in the eyes of Noah, but seeing the young Noah. And it was the most beautiful tribute to John Beasley, and it was also a beautiful transitioning into the next step. I will never forget that.
We all are such criers. That was like the baseline to be involved in the show. And I mean, yes, I think also what's cool is that the same for me, right? Like a lot of observing, a lot of sort of finding these physical gestures that I also felt proud that they were able in some ways to sort of melt away as it really became one person and as it really began to sort of gel together. There were some sort of, there were some that we did clip because it felt sort of didactic of like, don't forget, like all three of us are the same person, you know? And then it just became through sort of osmosis that it was so clear that I was sort of proud as we got to sort of meld together like that. And also, it's become concrete. Like that's now a lot of like the individual traits, I sort of said this prior, but the individual traits that we brought, like, I mean, we all are trying to know ourselves better and better. Like the things that I think that I like imbued into this role are now everywhere. Like, you know, the humor of it, I found so, like it began to come so naturally, and like this guy is like a funny guy. He's charming. It's not just this like yearning romantic lead that you often see in theater, right? Like there's dimension to everybody, and that is like what to mine. Saying this character is in love with this person, like the you know, there's a version of The Notebook out there in the multiverse that does not pass any sort of Bechdel test or reverse, right? I mean, like where the whole thing is about the other person. It's like we are full people with a full breadth of humanity, and that is actually easier to mine. You're not needing to manufacture the eccentricity or the specific things about this person. Like we made it as a community. Like these people are, I think of them as little like figurines in a little glass case that like we all got to sort of put our little colors into and whatever it is we wanted to add, and then we sort of closed it up, and then all 3 of us and 6 of us and the whole team and everybody get to sort of like bask in it. It's like our own little project.
It's one of the few shows, it's so interesting because now that everyone has devices, quite often in rehearsals, the moment your scene is done, everybody's like this. This is one of the few shows where everyone was kind of watching all the time. And as Ryan was saying, like kind of through osmosis, the Noahs kind of found a rhythm in their humor. Becca is such a great writer that she would lace those little things in there that you would then go, oh, I can see the evolution of this human throughout this piece. But watching them all watch each other and then slowly watching little things creep into the show that just felt natural and organic and beautiful, made it all feel like these are all the same souls. And there was nothing contrived about it. There were certain moments, as Ryan, said, in choreography, and Katie's filming was so wonderful about, being gentle, but also giving, an audience a clear understanding. If you came 10 minutes late, you missed this gesture. Like, later on, by the way, these people are all the same. The little moments in there and kind of figuring out, like, how much, how little, that it really was like that those weaving of those souls, which really are these beautiful humans that are making the piece, right? We can't teach that. It's just the greatest group of people on stage.
I feel like you can see that, you can sense the presence of everyone. Like you were saying, no one was on their devices in rehearsal. Like, I think that translated to the stage for sure. And so kind of zooming out a little bit, I'm curious, Shelley, I love that you said, oh, we changed, or like, Allie stays put to charging after Noah. But so from each of you, I'd like to know, was there a change that happened during the process, the development process, that has stuck with you looking back now? Did that question make sense? I got stuck in my own thoughts. I guess how, like, what is one change from the development process that has stuck with you? That was more
The day before we opened, maybe, so this moment before my days is actually, I think, a great example, because in looking, oftentimes you see an adaptation of something and the creators are either, because of the estate or whoever has the rights to it, or because they have a love for it or they have a personal connection or something, it's often that they stay precious about every single detail. And we really were not. While, of course, honoring the story and the book and the film and these iconic moments, like, we didn't cut the rain. It's like there's stuff in there that people want to see, and we recognize that, but it's also not a sing-along where the ball bounces along and people say, if you're a bird, I'm a bird. It's like they made sure, the writers and us, I think, advocated in this way to make sure that this was its own thing. And in doing that, we wanted to make sure, and I count myself among these people, to shift the story from this choice of 2 men that this person wants to spend their life with to the self-actualization of this young person alongside this other fully self-actualized person. And I think what's gorgeous about the show is that Noah continues to show up for this person. And if you're looking at it in terms of like just the middle arc, right? Like for the middle Noah, I found trouble thinking, okay, but again, like this reverse Bechdel test, right? It's like, does this pass this, or is this person just sort of helping this woman along in her journey? But when you zoom out and you see the entire story, in the older section of the story, it's Allie that's looking for self-actualization again, by remembering all the things that made her self-actualized in that moment in her life, and it's only because of this man who's persistent and able to provide the resources for her in retelling her and their life to her, that she's able to achieve that again for the final time. It's so beautiful, it makes me emotional. And so, in putting together that moment with prior to my days, and even just the middle arc in general, we and the creatives were very patient with me. As I said, like, while we are looking in the broad sort of scope of it to bring Allie toward this final moment, I want to make sure that Noah is a full human as well, and not just a responsive stimulus to somebody who is fun and sort of reckless in her speech sometimes, and steps in it a couple times by asking about the war and like, oh, did you go over there, in this sort of like trite way. I was wanting to stand in my strength as well, and that's why like the life story of it. These people are real and full and deep, all of them. Even the featured characters. Like we had these conversations about everything. The musical themes are. I've never been prouder to have worked on something where everything had intention. And so there are a lot of things that we added truly right before we opened, little just like tweaks of lines that made me feel like it was a conversation between two fully powerful, strong, self-actualized people that I am proud to go on stage, and like it also makes me feel secure in the times where Noah is an ass, because it's not a one-dimensional thing where I've been this way and then I also kind of do this rude or mean thing to her to make her realize something. It's you understand where he's coming from, you understand where she is coming from too. So again, like it's just so human. I feel like I'm exercising every bit of my humanity doing the show, which is such a gift in this industry.
I love this passion.
Can I just get like a little specific on this, because it's so incredible. With this, because this right before we opened, like they were like, the show's frozen. We're like, no, it's not. There was a moment, and it's so interesting when you work with someone for so long, and we could see that Ryan was like, there was a little bit of a disconnect, and he's such a good actor and such a gamer that will make anything work. And then finally it was like, what's going on? And there was a moment in a song that I will always call it 100 Lives, but it's actually not called that anymore. What is it called, Ryan?
I love you more.
I love you more. Right, I love you more. Because the 100 Lives lyric got cut, but we still all called it 100 Lives. And it's that last pass when older Noah is making his way to Allie, and Ryan, middle Noah used to sing this, "Can I carry you home this time? Can I carry you home?" And this is after Allie has left. And when we finally, you were so reluctant to say it, but finally you were like, why am I begging her to come back? And it was like, oh, right. She should be saying, like, and just like that little thing, we went downstairs with like, the piano was now in the pit, which was like up. It was a whole thing, but we literally made that change at the 11th hour, and it shifted everything about that moment for both of them. And Ingrid was making like lyric changes and melody changes because it was written for a man, and now she's singing it. It was like all the things, but it was so important. And because it was important to him, it was important to us, because he's always going to be inside it in a way that we aren't. And when we saw it, we were like, oh, can you imagine if we opened it that other way? Like it was so important to get that right, because they are two fully important humans in this moment that are both seeking so desperately throughout their entire lives. And to miss that would have been a big miss.
That's Broadway, baby. Oh, that's amazing. That's what we tell you. That's what I do. Were there any other changes that you two wanted to share about the show?
Yeah, there were a couple that came to mind in the last couple of minutes. The evolution of the Mother's song. It was a totally different song in Chicago, and Ingrid, it was a longer version of the older version, and it was a shorter version of that same song, and Ingrid never loved it. And she really hung on to that and really kept pushing back. She's like, she really hated it. In the end, she's like, guys, I just hate this song. I want to try something else. And we all just come to know and love and completely trust Ingrid and her amazing instincts. And she came up with this new song that is the song in the show now, and it just did the exact right thing, because it's the one solo that this character has very late in the show, and that's traditionally a weird thing, a weird assignment to give a a solo to a character who hasn't sung before, and it can't become like the big 11 o'clock number, obviously, but it's such an emotional linchpin in the story, and it says so much about what Little Ally is about to decide and how she's going to make her decision. And so finding that balance between it having the emotional weight, but not having it be like the thing that distracts us from the other characters that have been singing was so great to see Ingrid nail it. And then through previews, we would, Andrea was singing the song so beautifully, and there was a moment where Ingrid and I decided, like, I think we need to bring the key down. Like normally for that moment in a show, you're like, oh, it's got to be big, and it's, you know, getting the, it's getting emotional, and the stakes are high. But we're like, we need to bring this down and make it warmer and give the mother, like, she's such a complex character. You know, Andrea, I'm sure could talk for a whole hour about just what her arc is and the complexity of that, the mother's role in the story. But it was beautiful to watch that song unfold and eventually be a whole step lower than it was originally in a different song from Chicago, and it was very satisfying musically to see that take place. And then the other thing that came to mind was almost one of the last additions musically was the song Blue Shutters, which came, I don't know, like the second week of
Super Bowl Sunday.
It happened.
I went home.
Yeah.
Hand to God, we had 2 shows that day. Ingrid watched the matinee. She went home. It was Super Bowl Sunday. She watched the first half of the game with Will, and then he wrote. Ingrid's writing a song. She's like, he texted all day during the show.
What have you done to my wife?
What have you done
I
to
don't
my
know.
Super Bowl partner? You know, and then like 10 minutes later, during the second act, we get an Ingrid voicemail, and it was Blue Shutters, and it went into the show on Tuesday. She was like, "Can I send this to John?" We're like, "Yes, please." I was like bawling, and it went into the show.
Yeah.
2 days later.
And again, it's this perfect little moment where it didn't have to be a giant song. It's not like this massive, I want traditional musical theater song, but it's just this, I don't even know, 32-bar little songlet, and it does exactly what it needs to do. And that came from Michael saying, can we underscore this scene? The scene needs some music. And Ingrid was like, well, can I just turn it into a song? And then Super Bowl Sunday, intermission or halftime, she writes the song. Yeah, I love that.
When Ally finally sings, I know, and you know, we did it in Chicago and all, and it's such a beautiful song, and I think it's the first one Ingrid wrote, isn't it? Yeah, for the show. But I kept getting, I didn't know how I got there, because when we did it in Chicago, it was a done deal. When he walked in and said, Ally, I go, hi, I know, and I knew him. I went and I held his hand and I sang at his face, but we, our child, we have a girl, we have a boy. And I said, but I didn't quite know how I got there from a wheelchair and having the nurse say she's worse to suddenly be there. And it felt like, I said to Michael Shelley and Carmel too, I said, to me it's the recognition scene. And Ingrid, and I remember being scared, you know, I asked like everybody, I asked you in December, what do you think? I mean, is there any way? And then
You were like, don't say anything, don't say one,
just what? Well, I mean, I was thinking that maybe it's just a change in pronoun, really. And then Michael and Shelley spoke to Ingrid, and then oh shit. And then she came out and she was like, I love it. And then so it's just really a change of pronoun. I know you wrapped around a baby girl. I have a girl. I have a boy. He has your hands. Excuse me. And so it's the back and forward, as opposed to we have a girl, we have a boy. It's there's some place to go. There's a journey, and that it's just how the smallest, you say, a pronoun change can change everything. You know, in the telling of a story. And I was very happy when when Ingrid came and went, I love it. So, you know.
And not to take my self-actualization victory lap, but all of those things had to do with the self-actualization and deepening of the individual character. Like Blue Shutters allows for younger Noah to talk about his wants, his needs. The mom song used to be, you can come home now, you can do whatever you want, and now it's a communal thing, and it has history. And with the younger Allie that she sings, it's a song that they used to sing together. I mean, this change at the end of the show, this like recognition moment, as opposed to, you know, it was all so intentional. Like, I'm so proud of that.
How brilliant are they? You know, we could be here for 6 more hours, but we can't, unfortunately. My last question was going to be, why is The Notebook such a timeless love story? But that does not feel right after the conversation we've had. So we're revising, we're saying yes and, we're improvising. I would love instead for y'all to each write, I guess, a love letter to the company, to the group that made The Notebook, of how they've changed you as an artist. One sentence. That's probably harder. We can also
Back to your first question. Nobody wants to cry up here. We've got through an hour. We got through an hour without
That's
crying.
fair. That's fair. Or maybe if it's easier to say, what is and the actors I've kind of already asked you, but what is one thing you're going to kind of carry forward with you from this experience? Is that?
I know what it is for me. I mean, this experience was such an absolute collaborative joy, and as well as that, I think this is a true testament to what theatricalizing something can do. This is not just put the movie on stage, put the book on stage verbatim. We got so creative with how to make the story work for this specific medium, and that's something that I'll always be so thrilled to be a part of.
I love that. That was great.
I'll say,
Shall we?
I'll say what when you listen to the score, there are all of these repeated themes that go throughout it. And I think that, of course they're all the big songs, but all of these themes that musically just continue to repeat throughout the show remind me of how we weave in and out of each other's lives, and how we beautifully echo moments from our past. And it's all meant to be like parts of Allie's memory that are just little bits keep weaving through there. And I think about how the show's going to reverberate in me for years and years, and the experience and the people are just going to continue to play like gentle melodies through my life for the rest of my life.
That was perfect.
It was all for the segue, because I think the thing that I'm taking is that, like, I often tell this when I teach, and I haven't really been able to see it in myself or mean it for myself until this process, is that there really only is one authentic you, and the things that you bring to a role or a community or whatever, only you can really bring. And as a man in this world where I look around and see men have trouble being vulnerable and have trouble expressing themselves joyfully and not so joyfully in productive and communal ways, I have found this to be the safest space that I have ever felt to really just feel, dude. And like, I often laugh, like, I know people on the stage and in that room very well, but I've spent countless hours with other people in my life that I have never reached the level of emotional outpouring as I have in this group. Like, Marianne, I love you. You've seen me like lose my mind emotionally like 100 times, like literally just over a couple of years, and everyone in there has. And now audiences have seen it too. Like, it's just, it's such a beautiful thing to share, and there will never be enough of it in this world and in this country specifically. And so I am hopeful that when you think about this metaphor that like I always think of is, you throw a little pebble in a pond and it's like just a little ripple that you can walk away from, but like somewhere where you never see, it's gonna be a wave crashing on somebody. And like that is what we do, is like throw the pebbles, and we sometimes, the joy of it is we sometimes get to see the wave, which is such an embarrassment of riches, but 99% of the time we do not. And being confident and knowing that that is happening is the greatest gift of this experience.
That too. Marianne, bring us home.
Yeah, okay. I'm a great spokesperson, as people know.
I remember the party.
Well, in fact, I was going to say, and actually, that it is a quiet thing. It is, most of the people in our company, including, the crew has done big musicals, the orchestra. It could be performance. That it's people are capable of performing, and our play asks for not performing. Our play asks to go within and share. I look at, I call it a chamber piece. I don't think it's a musical, it's a chamber piece. And it's a sharing in which you are able to see the span of a lifetime, a life well lived, or 2 lives well lived. And it's just, like I say, it's a quiet, you have to be brave enough to not perform. You have to be brave enough to go inside and open yourself up and look someone in the face and be open with what is happening. And for me, I'm 71 years old, and it's sort of to feel so vital in a piece, to feel so young in a piece at times, and be permitted to. I'm 16 again, which is what I experienced with my own mom, going through her journey with dementia. I don't think there'll ever be another thing like this for me again.
I thought that was beautiful and absolutely the right note to end on. There's such an intimacy and, like Ryan said, vulnerability in this piece that I think will continue to resonate with audiences for years to come. So thank you so much for spending time with me today. Thank y'all for being here today.